Hi, Anne. Right, let's get this Clementine head cracked off. So far what I've done is I have got my back head. You've probably not got a problem with that. I've put a back dart into it and I've made up my set of ears that are a mirror image. I've still got my pattern pieces on the actual felt that I've cut out because I'm just going to show you the markings that you need to put in. And of course, now that I'm doing this, I've lost my super large needle. So where there are dots, you just want to put a big needle through. You can use a tailor's tack or a water-soluble marker. Make sure that you've marked these corners in some way because that shows you your seam allowance. I'm just doing it with a large needle, not the largest needle, not the one that I found earlier on anyway. So I've done that. Make sure you've put your little snips into your triangles as well, because they're important position markers. So I've done that one. Take the pins out on that, out of the way, and then do the same on the side head. So I've just done the front head, this is the side head. This one will be a bit more difficult because there's a double layer of fabric there. I think I may have done this one already. So 2 there, 1, 2. You might want to mark your eye position as well, but I'm not going to do that in this video. And make sure you've got your notches in as well, which are there and there. All right, so I'll take that one off as well. The next, you can see that you see the little holes that are showing me where I start and stop. So the next thing is to take the front head, which is this upper head bit here, and you want to line the ear up so that the notch of the ear lines up with this dot that you've got here, and make sure that the edge of the ear matches along with that. So I'm just going to put a pin in at that level and a pin in here. Now what you'll find is that the ear extends beyond the notch that you've got there, but once it's sewn on a 1 centimetre seam allowance, the notch is irrelevant, if you know what I mean. So you should tack that in place at this point. I'm not going to. But you do the same on the other side, get the other ear into position. So again, get the notch of the ear and this shorter edge of the ear. You want your lining facing upwards and showing. You want the notch to match the level of the hole that you've made, and then the ear continues down along the seam. So when you've got those two in place like that, you're ready for the next stage, and that is using the side head. So with the side head, eventually this will be positioned onto there, and in order to do that we want to have right sides together. So I've flipped it over so that the curve of the side head is kind of opposite to the under curve, and you want to try and get the hole on the side head to match up with the hole that you've put in to the upper head, and that's about okay. So that will go like that. I'm just going to put my pin through there, and then you want to bring your hole that's on the lower, the nose part of the side head, and that little hole wants to match up with the hole that you've put at the bottom of the upper head. So I'm going to pin those two positions in place firstly. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn to the other side, and whenever you've got a curve that is going in an opposite way to the other one that you're matching up to, I tend to always put some little notches in on the tighter side, the shorter side, because that then allows it to spread out nicely. So my notches are only about 1/2 centimetre long, and that's just going to allow the edge of it to spread and match here. And the key here now is to use a 1 centimetre seam allowance, and I'm going to sew from where my spot is to where my other spot is. And I've lost the foot to my machine when I was going to my mum's, So I'm just going to be judging where a 1 centimetre seam allowance is. So I start at the dot, do a bit of reversing, and then I can carry along this line, this curve, until I get to the point of the other dot, reverse, and snip my threads. So I've got a line of stitching there, and I can take my pins out, check that everything's all right, and you can see I've now got my curve, but that I've still got 1 centimetre worth of free seam allowance up here, which will be important for the next stage. So to repeat that process, I'm going to get the other side head. It will eventually sit like that, but I'm going to flip it so it's right sides together. I'm going to match the dot at the top to the dot on the other side. I'm going to repin that. So it's important that you get your spots matched before you do anything else. So a spot or a dot to a spot or a dot, pin that in place. Again, I'm turning to the tighter side, and I'm just going to put in these 1 centimetre seam allowances all the way along. This is exactly how you should treat any seam that seems to be going with a curve going one way to a curve that's heading in the opposite direction. This will help you cope with that curve, because obviously the length of the seam is right at the 0.1 centimetre in, but it's not okay on the edges of the actual fabric, and it looks scary. So again, we're going in here. I'm going to go from the dot, a bit of reversing, 1 centimetre in, and I'm only going to sew as far as the dot at the bottom. So I've got another seam there. Take my pins out and have a look. So I'm starting to get my cat, looking a little bit like a cat. The next thing you need to do is you need to get a hold of the ear, and you bring the ear round down the side of the head, because these curves are the side of the head. So just swing that around. Probably if you're struggling to get it around, that notch that is in the ear, you can go in and make it a little bit deeper so that the ear itself will spread out a little bit more for you. So that notch that you'd put in the ear, you can just go in and make it a little bit deeper, and that will allow you to swing the remaining free edge of the ear around. And you probably will want to tack this in place, but I'm just going to pin it. So that goes like that, and then this one swings around here. You're spreading it out, and you'll find that the end of the ear comes up roughly to where the notch is on the side of the head. So we've now got the ears sitting in the right place, and the next thing you're going to do is put the back of the head onto them. So right sides together. Your ears are obviously the right side, your dart seam allowance is the wrong side, so we've got that showing. I put the back of the head on so that the notch matches. I hope I'm doing this in the right order. I've not looked at this for a long while. But I tend to do this so that I get one side right first. I don't sew all the way around the head. You'll have a notch there that matches up to where the seam is. And you'll just come round the ear. I'm going to repin that. You'll find the notches match, and then you can come down to the bottom. And as I said, I always just sew one side at a time on this because it can travel and move, felt can. So I'm starting at the centre, front or centre back. I am coming around. I've got a 1 centimetre seam allowance. If the ear starts sticking out, I can just push it back in with a pin. just adjust as I go. Felt's really forgiving, so it won't, you know, it's not the end of the world. You can stretch and ease it. Bit of reversing at the end to keep the neck strong. So I've done one side, and if I just turn that through, you should be able to see that the ear is now sitting perkily into the side seam and also into this side side front seam as well. So that sits at kind of a little angle in there. So if I turn it back through, I can do the other side. To do the other side, I tend to normally flip the project because I like to have the bulk of my fabric always on the left-hand side of my needle, because I just judge my seam allowances much better that way. It's just what I'm used to, I suppose. So get that in place. I wasn't sort of trying to eat my pins then, honest. Bring my ear down so it's matching all the way along, and you probably will have tacked that in place. My notches are matching. I can bring it round to the neck, and then I can just pop that one in. You just want to make sure that you're not catching any little points of that ear into the seam allowance anywhere. Open up the excess seam allowance from your previous sewing and keep that 1 centimetre seam allowance as you head around the curves. Okay, so I'm not trimming anything off because I'm going to eventually stuff this. So I now can turn this through, and I should have 2 ears that are looking like cat's ears. Yeah, so that's looking right to me. But obviously I need to do the last seam on the front. And for that, it's this open part here. I'm going to move the top panel out of the way and kind of fold it back on itself so that I can sew from exactly the point where I stopped sewing before, just here. And I'm going to come down to the very base of the neck. I'm going to use a 1 centimetre seam allowance again. So I'm just going to push in the bulky layers. I really don't know where I've lost my foot to. Oh, come on, let's get in there. Okay, so I'm going to start where I stopped. So a bit of reversing. Oh, I haven't put the foot down. It's not going to be great, anyway. There we go. Bring that through. So I've now sewn from where the stitching stopped before down to the bottom. I've kept that top seam out of the way there. And now I can just turn everything through. I tend to try and get hold of an ear point firstly to bring through to make it easier, and then push the rest through, and you can see that it's starting to look like a puskins, hopefully. There we are. Okay, so you may have got like a little pleaty bit on the end of the nose. There, you can push any seam allowance back in like that. There we are. So it looks like you've got like a Y shape, I suppose, there. This is all going to be covered anyway, and that's looking quite good. The next thing you need to do is you're going to, I can't remember if you stuff this first actually, but you kind of position the contrast nose, obviously, so it's central, but you want this little Y shape to sit over the Y that you've created. I tend to put a pin in here. I can't remember, it might be easier to, I can't remember whether I stuff this first, to be honest. But anyway, you smooth that down. Bring it down on the other side. I think you do stuff it first. And then you sew all the way around the outside, and you're obviously going to put a little black V over there. Anyway, hopefully that gives you a better idea of what's going on. I think this cat's a Siamese. Thank you.